Media's Mining Weekly is speaking to Adrian Reynolds, a highly experienced geological and mining consultant who is active in South Africa and internationally. Adrian, how can South Africa's exploration potential be unlocked?
Martin, it's obviously not simple, but I'm going to take you back to how we did it in the old days at Randgold. Every country in Africa, we classified it into 4 categories, A, B, C, and D, and we did it on 4 different factors. Geological opportunity, which is by far the most important, political stability, economic and fiscal regime, and infrastructure. Okay, so if you look at South Africa from an outside and say, how does South Africa rate on those 4 categories? Okay, geological opportunity, fantastic. You know, people run around and say, oh, well, we've explored it all, we've seen it all, there's nothing else to discover. That's nonsense. In the last 20 years, exploration has increased the potential for using technology. Our ore body models have got better. We know so much more about how ore is formed and where to look for it. And the last 20 years, very few people have done that in South Africa. So I would say the potential is still enormous. The Overberg group gave a talk the other day on the Northwest Cape. I mean, it's hardly touched. There's all the base metal potential there, and there's only a few of the prospects that have ever had a drill hole in them. So geological opportunity, we've got it here. There's no doubt about that. Political stability. Okay, there are obviously a few doubts, but when you consider where people are working in the DRC, in Sudan, in Mali, in places where there's insurrection, Mozambique at the moment. But, you know, as we've discussed, mining companies get around that sort of thing. And in general, incoming governments understand the importance of a stable mining industry and the importance of having the expertise and technology that comes from the mining companies. So in general, they reach a consensus, they reach a way of working with the mining company. So I don't think politics is the big thing. The third factor, economic and fiscal regime. This is the big issue, and I'll come back to it a little bit in a minute. Infrastructure. I mean, big tech, you know, what country in Africa has got better infrastructure than us? Admittedly, we have a bit of a problem with power supply at the moment with Eskom, but it's still better than just about anywhere else in Africa. And mining companies are used to putting in backup generators. You know, there's nowhere in Africa, no matter what sort of power grid you have, you always put in backup power. So infrastructure is not an issue. You can drive just about anywhere in the country in a normal 2x4. So the big thing is economic and fiscal regime. And here I've got to say, it's not the regime per se, it's not the percentage tax, it's not the royalty, it's the stability of the regime. So you go into a country and the government says you get X, Y, Z, and maybe the tax rate is 50%, as for instance, it basically is in Egypt. You look at it and say, okay, 50%, can the project carry that? If the project can carry that, you're still going to go in there. Then you have a country that offers you 20% or 10% or whatever. It starts a much lower grade project. And then when you get there, the government suddenly decides, you're making too much profit. We're going to change the rules. So that's the problem, is the lack of stability. So you have a changing environment, and we understand circumstances change. The government need to extract more economic rent from the project. They want to put taxes up. They've underestimated how good the resources are in their country. So they want a super tax or something like that. That's all very well, but these things must be grandfathered. So if you go into a country with a 20% tax regime and you put a lot of money, take all the risk, start going on it, and then as soon as you make a profit, the government turns around and says, right, it's now a 50% tax regime. You just don't want to invest in that sort of country. We've seen this in Tanzania in the last little while. The late president there changed the rules, and there are very few people doing active exploration there anymore. Certainly only the countries that are actually operating in the country and have a mine. Those are the only guys who are looking for more stuff in Tanzania. So that stability is very important. And in this country, the Black empowerment movement absolutely correct, the right thing to do, but the rules were set and then the rules changed. And you can't live with that kind of thing. You've got to have the stability knowing that, okay, you're going to give 26% away of your company, but you don't want one day to be told, well, it's got to be 51%. That's wrong. The cadastral system, yes, we need to know what is available. I was looking at something on the mines in British Columbia, and you get onto the British Columbia government website, and there's all sorts of different things you go through. Eventually, you can get onto this interactive Google Earth map, which shows you where all, and I mean all, the copper gold porphyries are, how big they are, what sort of geology they're in, what's the grade, et cetera, et cetera. It's just online, doesn't cost you a cent. Southern Australia is the same. Western Australia is the same. All this stuff is readily available at your desk. And we need something like that. We need that transparency in who's doing what. We need the laws to be properly effected. If you have something for 5 years or 10 years and there's certain requirements, if you don't do that, if you don't fulfill those requirements, you need to lose that ground. So all the data collected by these companies must be available when they drop the ground. That happens in British Columbia. You go in there as a company and the directors of the company are noted, and you take some ground out, you go and do your drilling, geochem, geophysics, whatever, and you decide you're not interested. You don't just keep that data, throw it away. You have to return it to the government, and then they make it available publicly for the next person to come along. I mean, it makes sense. You know the story that it's often the fourth lot of exploring, the fourth lot of drilling that actually finds the deposit. Now, if the earlier stuff is lost, then you never get to the fourth stage or the fourth level of knowledge. Training. I'm working with a company called Stibium in the northeast of Limpopo, the old gravel mining operation of JCI and Anglo-Vaal. It's antimony and gold. And basically it's been going since the 30s, perhaps even earlier. And at one stage it was a crown jewel for Anglo-Vaal. They made a lot of money out of it, depending on whether the gold price was high or the antimony price was high. It passed to JCI and then went through a couple of other local companies and eventually went into liquidation. The Aussies came over here, got it out of liquidation, and have been trying to get it going. The staff in the mine are great. Talking specifically about the geologists, young, keen, eager, but they've had a gap from the old days of the Chamber of Mines and the Chamber of Mines system and the mining company system, which ensured that they got exposure to different types of deposit, went through training regimes, and learned from their mentors. And you know, I've got to say, not all of my mentors were great. Some of them were very, very old school, but I had some really, really good guys pointing me in the right direction. And I think over the last 20 years, with the end of that system, there's been this big gap. So, you know, despite how young and keen these geologists are, they haven't had the experience of the mining house system and working out the best way of doing things, understanding the let's call it QA, QC side of things. And there is a gap there. We have a couple of interns at the moment on the mine, and you know, it's making a difference. Just to come back to infrastructure, the one gap that we've got here that should be filled, you know, we have a gold refinery. Rand Refinery was obviously built for the local gold mines. It's been very successful. With the drop in local gold production, we now have gold coming in from different places in Africa, which is great. We have platinum refinery capacity, which is fantastic, and that works well. But there's other strategic minerals that we should be doing as a point of attracting in mining industry. Rare earths. One company I'm a director of has a rare earth project in Malawi. And rare earths, you can produce a concentrate and you can ship it straight to China. Or if you want to get away from supply chain restrictions with China, you have to build your own refinery. There are very few in the world. There are a couple in Europe. I think there's one in America. South Africa has the potential to put something like that together for the SADC countries. We have 2 or 3 potential rare earth projects in this country. There's Malawi, there's Tanzania, there's one in Mozambique. All of those can't support their own refinery, but if IDC got their act together and put one in this country, all of that stuff would come into here rather than going to China or to Europe.
That was Creamer Media's Mining Weekly, speaking to Adrian Reynolds, the highly experienced geological and mining consultant active in South Africa and internationally.